On today's show, Tracy McGrady takes a shot at James Harden. Is he right to call him out? Plus, could Victor Wembanyama win Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie? Then we look ahead to the teams most likely to make a big jump in wins next season. It's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you might be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We'll talk about Vegas's belief in Wemby for Defensive Player of the Year and teams that could make a jump in wins next season. But let's start with Tracy McGrady's comments about James Harden wanting a trade away from Philadelphia. Talking to Howard Beck for GQ, Tracy McGrady said of Harden's trade request, quote, "That makes zero sense to me. Not only that, but I look at all the teammates he's played with. James has probably played with more Hall of Famers than anybody in the league, and he doesn't have a ring to show for it. I don't know what he's looking for," end quote. Adam, what do you think of T-Mac's comments?
This is the part of the offseason, Wes, where the temperatures get a little hotter, we get a little bit more bored, and the takes just start getting wilder and wilder. I think there's something to what Tracy McGrady is saying about James Harden. I do think that his career to this point, and likely, I mean, depending on what happens over this final stretch, likely is going to be defined by trade demands, coming up short, and not being his best games, not being at the biggest moments. So in that sense, we can say maybe a little bit of a loser or what have you. But when we were going through this and looking at players to have not gotten over the hump, there are a lot of our favorite players to ever play the game. Allen Iverson, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. Part of this, I think, is fair. Part of this is true, but too far.
Right. In terms of like what James Harden wants, I understand Tracy McGrady's stance there. We know what he wants right now. He wanted money, and then he didn't get it, and then he got pissed at Philadelphia, and now he wants a trade, right? But like last year, he gave up the money to play for Philly,
right?
And Tom Brady taking a pay cut type deal only lasted 2 months until we got that report by Woj on Christmas morning saying, by the way, Harden wants his money back this summer, and if they don't get it to him, he's going to go to Houston, who had won like negative games by that point in the season. So it's money is the answer. It's always money, except for those 2 months where he didn't really care about the money. In terms of like the level of failure, because you mentioned, like we were talking before we started recording, like guys that never got over the hump, like James Harden is probably the greatest player to not get over the hump to ever play with the greatest teammates. What I mean by that is this: James Harden himself has won an MVP award and he's placed in the top 5 in MVP 5 different times. Third in 2020, second in 2019, 2017, and 2015 in MVP voting. His teammates, to Tracy McGrady's points, unbelievable teammates: Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, Joel Embiid, right? Joel Embiid won the MVP with James Harden last year, obviously. Kevin Durant, he played with him twice in OKC and in Brooklyn. He never won an MVP when he was playing with James Harden, but he won it. He was second in 2012 with LeBron James. And he won an MVP 2 years after Harden got traded. He played with Russell Westbrook, who won an MVP 4 years before getting traded to Houston to play with Harden. The teammates are unbelievable, and yet he made it to one finals as a sixth man in 2012. He went to a conference finals in 2015 and 2018. But for the most part, he's kind of just a second round and out guy. And when you consider that with the teammates that he's played with, yeah, it is a failure. It has to be considered a failure so far.
He's one of the toughest guys, I think, to historically place all time, because as a regular season player, he is in a tier that I think would surprise people as a regular season player. I mean, a guy that can carry, and it's hard to quantify. That's why I hate player rankings. It's hard to quantify like true value. Some guys just score and they do it at a high level. Some guys do all around. Is one more valuable than the other? James Harden is an all-around guy who can score and facilitate and just single-handedly carry you to 55 wins. He's one of the best to ever do it. So he's an incredible, incredible player. I always get a little uncomfortable when we talk about losers, and saying, oh, that guy's just a loser because they got this close but didn't get over the hump. And he did get this close, by the way. very, very close to beating. Not just, by the way, Wes, this wasn't like he lost to one of those down year teams, whatever. It was the Kevin Durant Warriors that the Rockets almost beat. Yeah. So it was a great team that they challenged, and he came up a little bit short. At the same time, it's hard to separate the art from the artist, and the artist has on multiple times not made good situations work and demanded his way out of teams that were on the doorstep of succeeding. And when that happens multiple times, including right now, by the way, I understand the money. I understand the idea of like, hey, you told me to take a discount and you pay me back on the back end. Now you're not doing that. I'm slighted, all of these different things. But at the same time, also look at it and say, if you come back fully committed to the 76ers, aren't they like a top 5 team to win the title next year? And if things break right, just a little bit better, maybe you win a championship. To me, it's hard to square the idea of being that close and yet again being unhappy and willing to blow it all up.
He played in Houston for so long, and to your regular season point, like right around like 2016, 2017, we were having the conversation about where James Harden could potentially rank all time in shooting guards. There are Houston fans, and I'm going to make this local Miami, Houston fans saying that James Harden was a better player all time than Dwayne Wade.
FT just made that argument. An NBA player. By the way, I think it's a sound argument in some ways. No. In some way. In this way. Again, a guy that does
stop watching in the playoffs.
Sure. But this is my point, is it's hard to sometimes understand carrying a bad team to being very good versus making a very good team a champion. It's hard to say, like,
right,
are these two things sometimes are not the same. James Harden is great at the first one. Dwayne Wade was great at the second one. Neither was necessarily great at the other ones. And so that's what makes it so unique.
If he would have just stayed in Houston, and obviously there were extenuating circumstances, and I'm not blaming him for leaving. They fired everybody. Everybody was gone. It wasn't the Houston that he had been playing with. He left OKC because they couldn't pay him and they traded him. That's not on him.
That's not on him.
If he would have just stayed in Houston, he might have more of like a Damian Lillard type of career that we're talking about, right? Where Dame did have the playoff moments. He had the like goodbye OKC kind of moments. And that is the thing on James Harden's resume. It's like the playoff stuff's not great with him. It's just not, the numbers don't look good. Yeah, he did run into the Warriors a couple of times, but also sometimes he just didn't. And they just pooped the bed, you know? And so it's the post-Houston career that makes it so hard to evaluate James Harden in terms of a career, because it's just the constant moving, it's the constant not being happy, it's all that kind of stuff, and putting him before the team, ditching Brooklyn right at first sign of drama, first sign of struggle. Now leaving Philadelphia, like you said, kind of a ready-made contender if he just walks back in next year, and now he wants to leave. And I guess if you're a Harden apologist, well, he wants to go to the Clippers, right? Okay, cool. You're jumping from one contender to the next. That doesn't mean anything to me.
But hold up, Wes. Are you surprised that this is how it's ending in Philly?
No.
This is the point. Like, we're not surprised by it. We can all sit here and be like, well, maybe. No, we're not surprised. This is the playbook. And sometimes when you look at a guy's career arc and you look at things and you say, okay, I don't predict he's going to get over the hump there. I don't predict everything is going to go swimmingly. And I think it probably ends with him demanding a trade and upending everything and leaving scorched earth behind. Guess what? It's exactly what happened in Brooklyn. It's exactly what's happening in Philly. We have ourselves a trend.
Quick question. If he goes to the Clippers, or let's say he stays in Philly, whatever. If he stays in, no, I guess it's different. And they go ahead and win a championship. If he stays in Philly and he wins a championship, or if he goes to the Clippers and they win a championship, do you change your opinion on James Harden? Is one ring enough given what's gone on the last couple of years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if he stays in Philadelphia. I mean, if you go to the Clippers,
I'm with you on that.
If you go to the Clippers and win, it will feel a little bit more like KD. And by the way, this feels like a hot take, and it kind of is, but we've only seen KD win with the Warriors. Mm-hmm. The question of can he win on a different team is still like a valid question. Can he do it? And I think if James Harden went to another, like just kept trying to get more and more stacked teams, like more and more, like you're like, okay, at some point, who really gets credit for the success? In Philly, Embiid is the main guy, but Harden is a very close second guy. Right. And by the way, if they were to win, it would be because of the duo of Harden and Embiid, right? That oftentimes it's like Jokic and Murray. It's like a point and counterpoint type of dynamic. If you go to the Clippers, I don't know what would that be? Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. Like it's not really the duo. It just would feel like something different. The same
really
way
should just
in
stay
the Warriors. felt something different. It didn't necessarily feel like a 1-2 punch. It just felt like a stacked deck. Yeah. So for me, Harden is in my opinion, the perfect situation for him to rewrite the book on himself. But what do you know? He doesn't want it and is demanding out.
He should just stay there. Coming up, could Victor Wembanyama win Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie? It's never happened. Could he be the first one to do it? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount on bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you're going to land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 that you could spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. However you're tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much. Defensive Player of the Year odds recently came out on FanDuel, and Victor Wembanyama has the 11th best odds, a hair behind Joel Embiid, Brook Lopez, who almost won it last year, Nick Claxton. Jaren Jackson Jr. is the favorite to repeat. Other places, by the way, have Wemby's odds even higher than 11th. I've seen him as high as 6th. But Adam, do you think that Wemby really could win Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie?
No. I mean, he could, I guess, a tiny chance, but those odds are, hey, we're a little excited about this guy that we don't know quite enough about. We saw in Summer League, which, by the way, the thing that was underrated about his performance in Summer League is that his defensive impact actually was real. Yeah. But we also saw that he is very much a young player who doesn't know the game yet. He's got interesting skills. He's got obviously incredible measurables, but the game of basketball, he still has a lot to learn. And I think the more I watch basketball, the more I see how much rookies come into this league unprepared mentally. Like just, okay, they have so much to learn. It's like you go from high school to a PhD physics course. It's like we skip some steps and we're going to have to make up for lost time. So I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to have moments. I think he's going to have a few stat lines that really popped. Oh my God, did you see he had 10 block shots tonight? Unbelievable. Yeah. He's going to have some crazy individual stat lines, but I think in aggregate, he's just going to have too much to learn.
Yeah, he's going to get a triple-double with blocks this year, and it's going to be like the lead story on SportsCenter for a while. It's so hard now, to your point, to be a rim protector as a rookie. It's harder than it ever has been. The differences in the pick and roll game, the spread pick and roll, how much space that you have to cover, getting up on to the level of the screen and getting back, all these things that, I mean, you've seen like Nikola Jokic have to learn, and he's not nearly like the defensive talent that Victor Wembanyama is, right? And I do think that Wemby will walk into the NBA and, like you said, he's going to have some crazy stat lines, right? Can he be an actually good defender? Because I also think that, there was a time where voters would just kind of look at the block shot numbers and like, if you have the most, you kind of win Defensive Player of the Year. If you have a bunch of rebounds and a bunch of block shots and you're a rim protector, we're going to give it to you. And I feel like voters have gotten a little bit smarter on this stuff over the years. That said, if he does lead the league in blocks, like you mentioned his Summer League, he had 8 blocks in 2 Summer League games. In Europe last year, he averaged 3.6 blocks per game in 20 minutes.
Which is lower than you would think, by the way. Like Walker Kessler averaged that in college. So again, Walker Kessler
in barely 20 minutes a game. Like that's.
I'm just saying 3.6 is a lot, but I think sometimes people are thinking the number's going to be astronomical because he's 7'4" and all this or that. Yeah. But it's like, hey, and by the way, that was a lower level league, that he was playing in. So
exactly.
So I just, we do this every time where we anticipate what will be and not what is right now.
I think the baked in part is just the Wemby excitement. I found this interesting though. I did go back and just say, all right, has a rookie ever won Defensive Player of the Year? No, they haven't. But who's been the closest rookie to ever win it? Manute Bol came in second place. Wow. When he was a rookie. Tim Duncan was a top 5 finisher for Defensive Player of the Year votes when he was a rookie. That's it. That's the list of guys who finished in top 5 defensive player of the year voting. Tim Duncan, one of the 10 greatest players of all time, and Manute Bol, one of the greatest defending rim protectors of all time. Manute Bol averaged almost 5 blocks per game as a rookie, which is wild. Do you think Wemby can get to that? Like 5 blocks that's so many blocks.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would say probably
the game is more spread out, by the way,
Yeah.
now than it was at that era too. Plus, I think Manute Bol was 40 years old his rookie year season. I think so. Unofficially,
It is a little bit different. Yeah,
a little bit different. Does this help or hurt Wemby's case? The Spurs last year were ranked 30th in defensive rating.
Oh,
So like, if they're 10th, if they're 11th, if they're like up there, does that help his case?
If you're looking for the new variable, absolutely. All right, so like just fast forward a few months, end of the last month of the season, you got team PR departments putting out the stats and putting out the stories and trying to leverage their players for these awards. That would be something that they would say, hey, we were 30th last year, and now we're 10th. What's the biggest difference? It's the number 1 pick in the draft. It's Victor Wembanyama. The other thing, too, is you look at who's in front of him. Jaren Jackson has the number 1 odds. I would be shorting that. And it's nothing against Jaren Jackson Jr., but you look over the last 25-ish, 30 years in the NBA, or 20, 25 years, the guys who have won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards, it's Dwight Howard, Kawhi Leonard, and Rudy Gobert. Like all-timers. Kawhi at his peak in San Antonio of defensive octopus craziness. Dwight Howard, who won 3 times in a row in Orlando. Right. And then Rudy Gobert at his absolute peak powers in Utah back-to-back. Like, those are all-timers, top 1% ever defenders, right? And so Jaren Jackson's really good, but he's not that good. I don't think I would be shorting that, right?
If Wembanyama wins this year, I mean, he might get like 15 of these, right?
Yeah.
The award might they have to get rid of it. If he wins it in year 1, because he's probably going to win at some point.
Yes.
But if he does it now, do you have the odds in front of everybody else? Do you have them up still?
No.
Because I'm kind of curious who the contenders are. You could always get a Draymond year in there. I mean, he's always good if he plays enough games. Mobley maybe sneaks into the conversation.
So Evan Mobley was Evan Mobley, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson, and Bam in the top 5. I can't remember that was not in order. I can't remember the exact order. I would be like, if we're just gonna be doing like FanDuel, like kind of look aheads here, I kind of like Claxton. I mean, his odds were pretty low. If you're just looking for a value bet, I don't know that he'll win it, but it's a good value, and he's an awesome defender.
So I think the thing in today's NBA with voting in particular is it's not even just overall impact. They want to see versatility. So a guy like Bam as a rim protector is not as great as some of these other guys, but it's the rim protection plus perimeter defense, like his ability to defend everything that makes him so dynamic.
I have a question on Bam.
What's that?
I have a question on Bam with you because my co-host on Locked On Heat, we talk about this all the time. Like, what is sort of the national perspective on Bam Adebayo? What's the national opinion? Because in Miami, it's a lot of like Miami media propaganda. Bam is the best defender in the NBA. And by the way, I believe that Bam is the best defender in the NBA. I really do think that. I don't really care about the lack of block shots. But what's your opinion on Bam, having just watched him in the finals?
So he impressed me more at the end of that than at the beginning, despite the fact that Denver won in 5.
Right.
Because in the regular season, as you know, Jokic did not see him. Like Jokic always had, for the last like 3 years, elite games against the Miami Heat because typically they would guard him like a norm. They wouldn't change their strategy or their coverage. What was impressive to me, so going into that series, I thought Jokic's going to average 40 points a game because he's just too little. Like Jokic is much bigger than him. What impressed me was they decided to front the post. They came up with a scheme that worked to mask Bam's physical deficiencies against Jokic, but because his skill set was so versatile, he was able to execute that scheme. So to me, that's what was so impressive about him. And I imagine, by the way, Wes, that next year when the Heat and Nuggets match up, they're going to front because you have to like come up with the strategy and then employ it. And when you only play a team twice a year, you don't do that. When you play them in a finals, you do. And now I think they're going to have something. But it's the fact that he had the versatility to be able to say, how can we use his skill set to our advantage? They found a way to do that. That just shows how versatile he is.
When you said matchup, I thought you were predicting a finals rematch, and you got me a little excited there. But I'm just going to list the FanDuel odds to wrap up this segment just so that people have it because we were talking about it. Jaren Jackson, number 1 at plus 500. And then you've got Evan Mobley, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo. It's in this order. Rudy Gobert coming in here. Draymond Green, Joel Embiid, Brooke Lopez, Nick Claxton. Then we have Victor Wembanyama. And I'm just going to name a couple more. At plus 3,000, we got Mikal Bridges and Walker Kessler tied. So those are the guys, right? Those are the guys.
Joel Embiid might be an interesting value bet there, just because I think he likes awards. And
he got the MVP.
Got the MVP. Might as well
going to complain about it all season. He's like, I don't know why I've never got on Defensive Player of the Year. I'm so good. Just like, all right, man, relax. Coming up, which team could be next season's Sacramento Kings? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. It's Friday, which means we are counting down to the weekend. We got our top 5 teams most likely to make a big jump in wins. Adam, where do you want to start?
Well, this list, I've done this exercise a few different ways. When I go through and just look at, the standings and try to say, okay, who's going to be where? I think this year is really hard because I think there's a lot of teams like last year, a lot of teams in the middle. And not a lot of teams at the top, especially when you look at the Western Conference. So I'll start by saying the Pelicans are not on my list, even though I think they are the number 1 team you could put because they had a disappointing year, but they do have Zion, they do have Ingram, and if those guys play, they're phenomenal. Guess what, Wes? I don't think they're going to play.
I'm not on my list either for the same reason. Yep.
If they do, we're all going to look stupid because to me, if you told me you're going to get 70 games of Zion, 70 games of Ingram, and those guys were going to get along or whatever, just, average level of health everywhere else, I would be like, oh, that team's a 3 seed. That's the Kings. That's exactly the team that's going to be there. They were there, by the way, Wes, last year.
Before they ever got hurt. Yep.
Until everybody got hurt and the wheels came off. So they
won 40. They ended up winning 42 games. Oh, FanDuel has their over-under at 44.5. That seems about right. You just got to bake in that they're missing. The best case for New Orleans is that their guys are healthy by the playoffs, which they weren't this last time. That's their best case. But it's almost like the regular season. It's like, yeah, this is going to be a 45-ish win team forever, as long as they're built around Zion and Ingram.
It's the same with the Clippers, by the way. Like
exactly.
Every year, including last year, Wes, people were like, you look at that Clippers team, man, that roster, you're like, guys, stop. It's been 4 years. It's never actually happened.
I officially have the Clippers out of my inner circle of contenders. Like when you start talking like contenders off the cuff, I think about the Clippers and then I skip over them and they don't come out of my mouth. I just don't have them there anymore. But go ahead.
So my number 1 team I have to make a jump here is the Indiana Pacers. 35-47 last year. A young team on the come up. And I love Tyrese Halliburton. I believe in him as sort of like a team leader, as like a team centerpiece guy. Benedict Mathurin's obviously Bruce Brown going to that team, I think, is like a really good fit for him because they play smart basketball and he's a smart player that fits in with those types. I like Nembhard. I like Obi Toppin as a guy that can be a reclamation project. Go to a team with a great point guard. Are you going to get nice cuts and nice, slashing open court dunks? So I just think that's a team that's going to be very good this year. Not great, but very good.
I was a believer in Indiana last year. They had some injuries towards the end of the year that kind of sunk their season. Their FanDuel over-under is at 37.5. I would probably go over on that. Indiana's my number 5 team too.
They were we had both of them had number 5. That's crazy.
Yep.
Next one, number 4, the Dallas Mavericks. 38-44 last year. Absolutely a catastrophic year for them. I don't predict Luka Doncic will miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. I just don't predict it's ever going to happen. I think it took a series of crazy things happening. Some of this is his fault, sure. I'll tell you another crazy take I have. I'm buying the Luka in shape year. I just think this happens, especially to European players. It takes about 5 years. It takes about 4 or 5 years for a player to be like, you know what? I need to be in shape in the offseason. I think this is the year for him. He missed the playoffs. He got a little embarrassed. Kyrie, you get a full year with him. Grant Williams, a phenomenal addition. I like Josh Green, Maxi Kleber, Rashawn Holmes. They got guys. And then, by the way, Dante Exum, I'm not counting on him to have a bounce back. He's another guy that's been, too many years of him getting hurt. But I will say to American fans that don't know, he went last year and played for Partizan Belgrade under what is arguably the greatest European coach of all time, Željko Obradović, who I personally have talked to enough of his former players. And I always ask, what did you think of this guy, Željko Obradović? They all say the same thing. He was the greatest coach I've ever had at everything, strategically, working with players, building up confidence, communication, in-game adjustments. I think Dante Exum might have gone to his college years a little bit later than anticipated, but I think he might actually be ready to have a Sean Livingston-esque late career, peak.
I love that. Break that out for social people. The Dante Exum bold take there. Bold prediction.
Buying stock.
I didn't have Dallas in my top 5 because I can't figure them out. I liked their offseason. I like adding Grant Williams. I thought that was a really smart thing. Olivia Maxence Prosper in the draft I just don't know how helpful he'll be as a rookie. I have so many questions about their defense. I still do. It's going to be so hard to build even an average defense when Luka and Kyrie are your backcourt. Luka has the ability. He just has to show some effort, and I just haven't seen it. So I'm not gonna believe he could do it until I see it. So I just left him out because they were so hard. Even though I also have an impossible time thinking, like you said, that they're gonna miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. That they're gonna win 38 games as opposed to being one of the best teams in the league record-wise the year before that. They're probably somewhere in the middle. But it wouldn't shock me if instead of being 38 and 44, that they ended up 44 and 38. And I just don't see that as like that big of a jump for them.
That's kind of a big jump. 6 games. That's
a big jump, but it's
in
not.
The NBA,
I guess
very few teams make a 6-game jump year over year.
I guess I'm grading Luka on a curve because he's at the point in his career now. You're one of the best 5 players, 6 players in the NBA, whatever. It should be better than that at this point. I don't know, but it might not be his fault either.
We're grading the Mavericks on 2 years ago, so you don't see a big jump. But last year they were a disaster. They didn't even make the play-in. So I think they'll be there. The one thing at Wes, if we do want to poke a hole in the Mavs, the Jason Kidd experience has generally been a straight line.
Yeah.
Great early on, and it just kind of goes this way, goes down. That would be the thing I would look at here and say, okay, year 3 of Jason Kidd, year 1 was great, year 2 was terrible. Is year 3 really a bounce back year? Or is it, hey, this might have expired already?
Can I give you my number 4 team?
Sure.
I've got Charlotte.
Oh, man.
It's just kind of the low bar. They won 27 games last year.
Right.
LaMelo barely played. They're going to get Bridges back. And they added Brandon Miller, who I like as just a solid player. I think there's been a lot of, oh my God, you took Brandon Miller over Scoot kind of stuff, but he's still a good player. And he plays a position of need for them. I think they'll be all right. I don't see them making like the playoffs, but they've generally been kind of closer to 40 wins as opposed to hovering below 30 wins over the last few years. So I got Charlotte there. Who's your number 3?
That one's low hanging fruit just because it was 27 wins. Like if they win 33 wins and miss the playoffs again, that's a huge jump. So could be. My number 3 is the Phoenix Suns. This is the most boring one. They won 45 games last year. Yeah. So if they just win 50 games, that's a 5-game jump. They'll probably be in the top 5 of, biggest improvement year over year. And I think the Phoenix Suns are an incredible regular season team. And I think despite the fact that you have new coach and new players, I think you have a right out of the package good team because I don't know that they're going to have dynamic offense. They just got a lot of bucket getters. Bucket getters know how to get buckets on day one. I think that's going to be a team that wins 54, 55, 56 wins, and that gives them a 10-win jump. I don't know if anybody will have more than that.
That's why I had Phoenix number 1 on my list. I had them number 1. They won 45 games last year to your point. FanDuel has their over-under at 52.5. They're going to blow right by that. I see them pushing maybe 60 wins. Like they're a regular season, as long as they stay healthy, and that goes for everybody. But like you said, I think they're going to be awesome like right away as a regular season team. They're just going to start winning games because they just have a bunch of guys who could score a bunch of points on every single night. And in the regular season in the NBA, that's kind of what wins games, Yeah. So I could see them pushing 60. And if that's the case, that could be 15 wins.
15 wins does not happen very often. Does not happen every year. I'll say this. If we were just doing regular season, I'm almost like factoring this in spiritually. And spiritually, the Suns were a top team last year, so they're going to be a top team, even though their record didn't say as much.
Right.
Their regular season win, I think takes a big bump up. I am just a little more skeptical about what they are in the playoffs. I just think they might be. Last year, what was it with Kevin Durant? They were like 9-0 until they weren't all of a sudden.
8-0,
this is how it's going to happen. I think for them in the playoffs as well. My number 2 team, the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Oh, you have them. Okay.
40 wins, 40 and 42. I think you get even more minutes out of Shea. So Shea already last year was unbelievable. I don't know that numbers-wise he's going to score 31 a game again, because I just think that's what you do last year when everyone else was a little bit behind. But this year you get Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey just being even more experienced. Those guys were already breaking out last year. You're going to get that. And then, of course, Chet Holmgren, he obviously joining this team and filling a void that they had. I think this is a dynamic team. I think they're incredibly hard to match up with, especially in the regular season. They stretch you out like that, and now they have a little bit of rim protection. I like the other Jalen Williams too, by the way, the big Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
So I just love their roster. It's hard to say, again, this is where the spiritual leap versus actual leap, because they were at 40, and I don't know that they're going to get past like 45 wins, but I just think they're going to be a real team next year as opposed to a fun, not real team.
I agree with you on that. I did leave them off because they did win 40 wins last year, and they feel like a 44-win team this year. But exactly like you said, Adam, like taken more seriously on a night-to-night basis, where you're like, can they climb out of the play-in tournament? Can they get that 6 seed kind of thing? Like, I think that's the conversation we're going to be having with OKC versus last year, which was like, whoa, they're going to get in the play-in tournament. What a great year for them. Surprise. Like, I think it's going to be about just the development of guys. We're going to watch Chet Holmgren in his first NBA year. So I'm with you on the spiritual argument. I did leave him out of my top 5 just because of what we were already talking about in terms of literally how many more wins could they actually get. Before
the regular season, man, who cares about the regular season?
I don't know. That's the segment. I know you've got one more, right? Before you
got
get
one
to
more.
It. Can I give you one more that I had on my list that you didn't have on your list?
I hope it's not the one. I hope it's not my team.
Your team, no.
Well, my number one, I'm saying.
Oh, no. I have the Miami Heat as my number 2.
It's your team. I love
my
it.
team.
Let's go.
They won 44 games last year in the regular season, and what was miserable. We kind of forget that because they were in the NBA Finals, but they were like not fun to watch in the regular season. It was a miserable regular season, basically hovering around 500 until the very end there. Obviously, the big Damian Lillard thing is up in the air, but I even think I'm going to bet on Dame being on the team just because it feels like it's trending that way. But but even if they don't have him, I still think that this team is better. You get a full year of having a real power forward in Kevin Love. I think they added depth on the wing between having Caleb Martin now coming off the bench, Haywood Highsmith, who kind of blossomed at the end of last year. You drafted Jaquez. You have Jovic coming back after being hurt as a rookie, and he looked good in summer league. I like their backup center depth, which I think it was, and that was a big kind of hole for them in terms of plus minus last year. I think they fixed that. I just like the team, and I like the addition of Josh Richardson. I think that's a really underrated addition on the minimum. And they went from the number 1 seed in the East 2 years ago, shooting the best of any team from 3-point range, to 8th in the regular season last year, shooting the worst, like bottom 5 in 3-point percentage, right? So I think they probably end up somewhere in the middle in 3-point percentage, and they win more than 44 games, because I just think that Bam, Jimmy, Spo, the talent that team already has. And then, of course, if they get Dame, that'll be helpful in the regular season also. But that's my Miami argument.
Who makes a bigger impact next year for them, Jovic or Jaquez?
If they're on the roster, I'd probably say Jaquez still. I just think Jovic is – I think Jovic is – first of all, Jovic is still like 2 years younger than Jaquez.
That's right.
And he's really raw. I think his skill set is really interesting, especially as like a long-term fit potentially with Bam. But Jaquez is just like out of the box. He's like a Christian Brown kind of, just like he's going to go out there, play really hard, fight over screens, make open shots, and that's your job. Just go ahead and do that. I think you could do that as a rookie.
All righty. My number 1 team, though, the team I am drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm actually punch drunk on the Kool-Aid. The Minnesota Timberwolves.
Again.
You heard what Bruce Brown said. Who was the toughest team they Nuggets faced in the playoffs the whole time? It wasn't your Miami Heat. It wasn't LeBron's Lakers. It wasn't Kevin Durant and Devin Booker's Phoenix Suns. It was the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards, a beast. This is a team that completely changed course last year in doing the Twin Towers thing to very mixed results. Karl-Anthony Towns in and out. Jaden McDaniels getting hurt from punching a wall at the end of the season and not being available in the playoffs. Sneaky big deal. I just look at this roster and I go, I like it, man. They've got defenders at all positions. They've got a superstar in Anthony Edwards. They've got a fake superstar in Karl-Anthony Towns. They've got pieces to trade should they need to. I think the Timberwolves are this year's Sacramento Kings, and a team that you look up in November and you go, oh, what a cool story. They're number one in the West. Then you look up in January and go, are they going to stay here all year? And then by the time April rolls around, they're a 3 seed and people go, wow, the Timberwolves, who go figure. And then they lose to the Warriors in the first round.
I had them number 2 on my list as well. And just peel back the curtain here for all of our listeners here. Around this time last year, you and I did a list of some kind, as we tend to do on Fridays. And I came into that show thinking I had a hot take, riding the Timberwolves. And you came into that show thinking you had a hot take, riding the Timberwolves when everybody was disparaging them after the Gobert deal. And I was like, did they pay too much? Yes. Do I still like the roster? Yeah, I really like the roster. And we were wrong. But we were wrong in part because Karl-Anthony Towns got hurt and didn't get to play the entire year. And if they get those guys healthy, I'm with you, man. I still like the roster. And they started to kind of figure it out by the end of the year. And like Bruce Brown said, they gave the Nuggets some interference in the playoffs. Their over-under is set at 44.5 wins. I'm slamming the over on that. I think it's going to be closer to 50. I think this is going to be a good regular season team. I think Anthony Edwards is a superstar. Like he is going to, and he's only going to take another level there. They've got a full year of real point guard play now with Conley in there instead of D'Lo. I like this roster. I like it. I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but
I like it, but I'm going to love it once they trade Karl-Anthony Towns.
Ooh.
I'm going to love it then. I mean, I don't know. Is it, you try to get like the OG Anunoby package, or maybe you try to get Mikal Bridges if Brooklyn, for whatever reason, realizes he's not the cornerstone piece. Like, it doesn't have to be the flashiest of names. It can be a package of 1 or 2 high-level role players. But I just love the idea of giving Anthony Edwards a little bit more space, making sure it's very clear that it's his team. And like I said, Jaden McDaniels is a hell of a defender. Rudy Gobert is a hell of a defender. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a hell of a defender. You've got guys that you could throw out there in a playoff lineup or in a clutch time lineup and just trust your superstar to carry you home offensively. That's a great formula. I'm with it.
Nickeil Alexander-Walker started to take a little bit of a leap towards the end of last season too. So he could be a big factor. I like it.
Well, I'll tell you this, Wes. Contract year, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. The only thing I'm looking at, because he really defended his ass off late season and in the playoffs. And I've just seen too many times where a guy who's never done that does it for a few months, gets paid, goes back to not doing that ever again.
Locked On NBA Friday is the only place where you get bold takes and bold predictions on Dante Exum and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That's what we do here. That's what we do here. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Every dayers, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. The show's going to be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the NBA weekend. In the meantime, you can find me over at Locked On Heat. Adam is over at Locked On Nuggets. Have a great weekend.